Brian, how are you?
Yeah, everything. Narrate coaching is actually
Nice,
coaching.
how are you? Oh, thank you. That's right.
That's a really nice touch in the window.
What?
The pillow and the lamp.
The pillow on the lamp. I know. I love it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you know, I coached a lacrosse team.
Yeah, you know the trick?
I know. You taught me
I
that.
just, just catching the home. And a bunch of oratory boys piled on, you know, right as we were coming through.
You probably put your name. You guys put your name. Maybe you.
Brian, did you put your name?
No.
Here you go.
Thank you.
You.
Only after asking questions.
Right.
I just read it for you. I don't trust my aging brain. I've had tougher crowds.
All right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I would love to thank Rich for being our moderator and the Yampolsky family for being our folks that we're gonna be interviewing today. And we're gonna be talking through their faith story. So Rich is going to get us going and be a kind crowd.
Unless they still starting
Oh,
our story.
absolutely. Let's pray, friends. Heavenly God, we're so grateful that you have brought us here this morning. As we enjoy conversation, as we enjoy donuts and coffee, may we catch glimpses of you. May we feel your love amongst us today and always. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Audrey, and thanks everybody for coming out on a brisk morning. You know, we're in double digits at least this morning, at least in this area. Rachel came down from Long Valley, where it's what, 27 below?
Yeah, I'm on the mountain, so.
This is sort of the first in what we hope will be an occasional series, maybe 3-4 times program year, of people being able to share their faith journeys, their faith stories with our larger Donuts and Theology community and the folks that will watch this on video afterwards. And we really like the opportunity to do this because our faith stories, each of us individually, are really, really important, aren't they? But it's great if we can get to know one another even better through the faith journeys that people like Paul and Michele and Rachel are going to narrate to us today. You'll probably find some points of connection. You'll probably find that in some ways their stories are yours. But you'll also find some points of divergence and how interesting and wonderful that part is too. So we're excited about this little program, and we hope that we'll do more of it in weeks and months and years to come. I'd like to begin just by introducing our panel to you, and it's in many ways a very familiar panel. Rachel Mabey is someone. Rachel, you grew up in this congregation.
I did.
Yeah. Rachel is a daughter of Paul and Michele, but she's also a daughter of Presbyterian Church in Morristown. She resides, as I say, up in Long Valley. Her husband, Steve, is right now taking their 2 girls, Hannah and Sadie, to church at St. Luke's Parish up in Long Valley, which is a Roman Catholic congregation. Rachel works for Mars Company up in Hackettstown, New Jersey. Mars Snacking.
Mars snacking.
Yeah. Right. That'd be a hard place for most of us to work, I imagine,
Yeah.
especially after a New Year's resolution. She was raised Presbyterian, but with an interesting twist, as we will learn. And we're so delighted that she came all the way down from Long Valley today. That's actually kind of a pretty ride.
It is.
Yeah. Dr. Michele Yampolsky took a bachelor's from Susquehanna University, and she has advanced degrees, master's, and a doctorate in education from Columbia Teachers College. She worked for 35 years in the Randolph schools, where she was choral director at the high school for a number of years, and then became the district supervisor of music education. That was 35 years there, 35 years. And then, because she just, kind of wanted to keep going, but in a different context, 17 years at Villa Walsh Academy, not too far from here. where she once again was choral director, but she also did all sorts of things musically to support the convent up there. Michele she was also an adjunct at Teachers College at Columbia, at Rutgers, and at Centenary College. She's been a member of our congregation for 40 years and a stalwart member of the chancel choir, where she has done just about everything that a person could do, including directing and accompanying and soloing. Michele has been a deacon at Presbyterian Church in Morristown. She is also a Stephen minister, and in record time, you had only been a Stephen minister for a short time, she became a Stephen leader, which meant more intense training. So Michele is certainly a familiar face to us all, as is Dr. Paul Yampolsky. Paul is a graduate, got a bachelor's degree from Rutgers University. He has taken advanced degrees in psychology from FDU TNEG and his doctorate from Rutgers. And I had not been aware when I got he got his doctorate from the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology at Rutgers. He was a New Jersey licensed psychologist for 32 years. Am I using the right tense? Are you still licensed?
Until June of 25.
All right. So he is a licensed psychologist in the state of New Jersey, and for 49 years, a New Jersey state school board psychiatrist. You're not providing psychological help to the school board members. They could probably use it. The students and staff and faculty in the schools. Paul spent a number of years working for the Randolph School District, 25 years. He was also an adjunct faculty member in the graduate psychology programs at Seton Hall and at Rutgers, and he has conducted workshops in stress management. I noticed this, for teachers. And let me tell you, we had a few teachers in the audience, and we know why that might have been necessary. And for cardiac rehab patients at St. Clair's Hospital in Dover. So that's our panel. It's a guest group, and we're so delighted that you would consent to be with us today. And before we get underway with some substantive questions, and basically we're going to be asking our three panelists to track us through the early, middle, and current status of their faith journeys. Just one quick question before we get underway, because this December was an interesting one. How was Christmaka in the Yampolsky family?
Christmaka was quite an event. At Christmas time, we have to recruit Christians, because there are more Jews than Christians. For Passover, we have to recruit Jews, because there are more Christians than Jews at Passover.
The family.
We're all messed up. But to enhance the spirit of Christmaka, I have a special yarmulke that Michele made for me. And I thought you might enjoy that. Would you like it?
It's a yarmulke clause. A yarmulke clause, right?
I wish we could say we had them for sale at concession stands around the
We have a lot of fun. It's wonderful to have an interfaith experience. The fabric, the tapestry of our lives has been enriched by all of the wonderful traditions, and Paul's family. My sister-in-law has taught me how to do a lot of the traditional things, and so it just feels normal.
What was the main course at Christmaka dinner?
Christmaka.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Brisket, latkes, noodle pudding.
See, we had Christmaka at our house, and yeah, I
It's
mean,
tradition.
I really
You
chow
can
down
do
on that
it.
brisket and
There are
latke.
rules.
Yeah. All right, well, did you have anything to add in on this? This must be quite a day for your children.
Yeah, well, so my daughters, we do it all in our house. They, know that their papa, as they call him, is Jewish, and that's a big part of, our family, and we light the menorah at home, but, they do Christmas too, so like, they get the whole thing too, but somehow it's not confusing to them, so.
Everybody knows who they are.
Exactly, it's great.
There's just something really American about this, that I like. let's start with you know our actual program here. In so many aspects of our lives, our early years carry some lasting and shaping memories. As regards your experience as a religious person, what are some of those early experiences that come to mind? And when you reflect on those experiences, what do you think or feel or see? And maybe we'll start with you, Michele.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Randolph, and so we moved there in 1950. And my parents were very active. I grew up in the Mount Vernon Methodist Church. If any of you know the Randolph area, it's now a Hindu temple. Sadly, the congregation was able to sustain itself maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. So I grew up in the church. My parents were very active. Both of them sang in the choir. And I was, went to Sunday school. I was baptized, went to Sunday school. I was active in the choir. And by the time I got to high school, I was accompanying and playing the organ and doing things for services. And I always felt that was special, but I didn't have a word for it. I loved being in that environment, always knew I wanted to do something with music. And so I was very active in our youth group, and my parents insisted that we went to church and to Sunday school on Sundays. It's just what we did.
It's a day and age when American families just all,
That's what you
or
did.
at least American Christian families
Right.
just all went to church. There wasn't much decision making that went into it. Paul?
Well, I've been here 40 years. There's something about 40 in the Bible. So I'm still wandering the desert. And eventually we'll get to the Holy Land. I did a timeline, and I think you did too, right? I don't know whether you want to.
Tell us about those early experiences that you had.
Well, the earliest experience was at birth. I was born in St. Michael's Hospital in Newark.
I was too. I don't remember you.
Which passing that way? And under the auspices of Sister Laurenti, who provided my family with proof that I was born at St. Michael's. This is show and tell. So this is it's not an official birth certificate, but it's a testimony to the fact that it certifies that I was born at St. Michael's. And even though we lived around the corner from the Beth Israel Hospital, you would think my mother would have been taken there, but it was so crowded in the years that I was born that they had to take her over to St. Michael's. So it's kind of a prelude to my experience with Christians. Started with Catholic and then transitioned to Presbyterian. And now people in the congregation see me as being either Presbyterian or a Jubiterian.
But you didn't start out that way, right? You did start out Jewish.
Right.
What was that? What are your memories about all that?
Well, my parents were both Jewish. My grandparents, they are all Jews. They came from Russia. My father was born in Russia, came here when he was 2 years old in 1910. And we went to temple as a conservative family. There are 3 sects, basically: Reformed, Conservative, and Orthodox. Interestingly enough, my father made a comment to me years ago talking about churches. And he said, Paul, you really don't want to go to a Reformed temple because it's like going to church. They have very little Hebrew, most of their services in English, and it's a more liberal approach to Judaism. So my grandparents were very Orthodox, but my family was more conservative. We were members of Temple Hope Shalom, which was on High Street in Newark, and you were there too. And that temple moved to South Orange when the very wealthy temple, B'nai Jeshurun, which was a Reformed temple, that's one that you'll see on the news a lot. And a Reformed temple, they went to South Orange also. High rent district.
Did you grow up attending Hebrew school?
Okay. Did you read my notes? I
Read your mind.
Thank you. Oh, that's scary. I'm trying to think when I started Hebrew school. I was probably around 8 years of age. I think the main purpose was to prepare the boys for bar mitzvahs. They didn't have bat mitzvahs back in the day when I was growing up. Only boys were celebrated bar mitzvahs. Nowadays, there are a lot of females that are celebrating their bat mitzvahs, which occurs at the age of 13. Then there's Hebrew high school, which nobody attends. It's like, get out of jail, free. You have to go, you should go to temple periodically, but we're very much like the C&Es, the Christians, the Christmas and Easter crowd that comes. They don't come during the year, but they come to those two main holidays. And for the Jews, it's Passover and Yom Kippur, which are the two main serious holidays. Some of the other holidays are more joyous, like Hanukkah and Purim, and they don't have the same significance as the previous two that I mentioned. It was interesting to me that my Hebrew school teacher was also a teacher at Weequahic High School.
Did you grow up in the Weequahic section?
Grew up in the Weequahic section.
Heavily Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Very heavily Jewish in those days.
Yeah, now the high school was 95% Jewish.
And renowned.
And my Hebrew school teacher taught Hebrew as a second language at Weequahic High School.
Wow.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
That's a testimony to the number of Jews that were enrolled there.
If any of us are Philip Roth readers, we know that. Are you a Weequahic alumnus?
No, our family moved to Hillside.
Okay, right. Which is your.
I was in 5th grade, and I finished the lower grades, and then went to high school in Hillside. My one brother went to Weequahic when Philip Roth was there.
So you grew up in this heavily Jewish section of the city of Newark. You attended Hebrew school. You got bar mitzvah, and you have this immersed Jewish experience as a child and as a young man.
We were not totally religious, like my grandparents. My mother made ham and Italian sausage, but made that when my father wasn't around. And he didn't mind that we would eat those products, and he was satisfied just to have a scrambled egg. But he never said, don't serve it. He allowed us to have ham. And we're an interesting family. I know you want to get to Rachel, because we're short on time. But
Talk about your mom riding your bike. Go ahead.
What about riding my bike?
When you went to synagogue after she died.
Oh, I didn't get, it's a
Yeah,
little over on the timeline.
That's all right.
I'll just briefly say that at age 14, that's a couple steps up on the timeline. When I was 14, my mother suddenly passed away from a massive heart attack at 46 years of age. And it was expected that I go to temple every day for 11 months. And I would ride my bike to synagogue in the morning for a 6:30 morning service. They weren't that long, but you know, it didn't allow me to do things like play football. I played football in my freshman year, but I couldn't play in my sophomore year because I was going to synagogue. So, and then I would pedal back home and then go to school. We took public service bus, so I didn't have to walk a mile and a half. And then after school, I would have to go back to synagogue for the afternoon service. And they combined that with the evening service. So that I did for 11 months.
Talk about immersion.
And I was okay with that. I was this young guy, 14 years old, with much older attendees. So that was a notable point in my growing up. And yeah, so I'll leave it there.
So
I didn't even know that,
So
so
you-
I just learned something new.
Glad you're here.
I've never heard that story.
So you obviously come up in a very interesting environment, your
Yeah.
family religiously.
Yeah, so I guess my experience has always been coming to church here. We went to Sunday school every Sunday, even when I didn't want to. But it was like, you know, what you did. And so we, you know, my brother and I grew up coming to church every Sunday, and you know, it was it wasn't abnormal for us to have, you know, our Jewish father sitting next to us in the pew. And I know I had friends ask me, you know, do you guys go to temple? And I said, well, my parents usually go on the holy days, but yeah, so you know, we grew up coming to church, but then in terms of holidays, it was always a mixed bag, right? So we, went from gefilte fish to you know, your ham on Easter, right? So it was always just, but it was normal. Like I never thought of it as being weird or confusing. Like I think that's the one thing my parents did a good job of, is it was never confusing. Which I think when you hear about that, you would imagine your child might be confused. Well, what am I? Am I Christian? Am I Jewish? And we used to joke, like, do you want a sweet 16 or a bat mitzvah? Like, I had a sweet 16, not a bat mitzvah, but yeah, it was just normal. So I don't really know how to categorize that. And then, you know, eventually I ended up going to Catholic school, so that was like a whole other thing. So yeah, it was like always just a myriad of cultures, but it was normal. Like I don't know how else to say it. And I think that's a testament to how they raised us. It just was what we did. And you know, I think most of our family that was alive was Jewish. So, you know, my brother and I would always go over to family homes for the holidays, and it was just normal. But I think now as an adult, you know, my husband's Catholic, which I think when we got married, like, I don't know if it was something that you were told when you were getting married, but it's almost harder to have closer faiths in kind of the experience than it is Jewish and Christian. So Catholicism and, you know, being Presbyterian, they're similar, but there's also a lot of differences. And so I think it's almost more challenging in that way. And I always said, you know, I just want eventually our children to just be children of faith. Like it doesn't matter to me what they believe in per se, but I think just to have that kind of guide rail for them to turn to in hard times. And so, you know, our children go to Sunday school on Sundays. We belong to a Catholic church in Long Valley. And when we were kind of touring churches, I said, I'll only go if I feel, you know, welcome and not kind of that old school Roman Catholic experience. And, you know, my husband was on board with that. And the second I stepped into St. Luke's in Long Valley, it was like everyone's welcome. Doesn't matter what your experience, what your faith is. And so I always feel very comfortable there. And even for our daughters, they don't really question, like, who we are and what we do. It's like we all believe in God and we celebrate this and we do that, and it's just, it's normal for them now too. So that's kind of.
They know about guilt.
They do.
They do. Does everybody here know about guilt? Guilt. You better
Not
define
guilt,
it.
not guilt.
No, not
Guilt.
guilt. Guilt we do
Guilt.
know about here, right? But explain it for
Guilt?
anybody that doesn't know what guilt is.
Money.
So they'll send the girls, you know, Hanukkah cards with guilt in it, and so they're like, oh, we got guilt, you know?
And then there's the kind of guilt that you unwrap and there's
Chocolate.
a chocolate coin.
Right, right.
Chocolate
Yeah.
coins.
Faux guilt.
Yeah.
Faux guilt. I think what was really helpful to Rachel, if I can just interject, the clergy that we interact with are just so crucial. And I remember talking to you about raising the girls Catholic, and I said, what will you do about communion? And so you went and you talked to Father Mike, who had been at Villa Walsh many times. And if you want to share that story, what he said to you?
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
Okay.
What did you say?
Well,
Your mother remembers.
I remember it because you went to him and said, Father, you know, my father's Jewish, I was raised Presbyterian, I went to Villa Walsh Academy, what do I do about communion? And Father looked at her and said, that's between you and God.
That's a good answer.
Good answer.
He wasn't a young priest.
No, he was a
older,
much older
yeah,
priest.
Close to retirement.
Right.
When he joined.
And even when the girls were baptized, you said to him, well, a third are Jewish, third are
Yeah.
Protestant,
Half
third
the
are
church
Catholic,
in yours,
because
yeah.
Rachel, I got this, don't worry about it. And they did it on a Saturday morning, and it was just incredible. It was really, so I think the clergy play a big part in this whole journey.
So you have very seamlessly saved me having to ask a question that I had planned to ask, which is, okay, so you have this immersive Jewish experience as a child and as a young man. You have this immersive Methodist experience, and then you have this immersive,
Melting pot.
yeah, sort of Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, Presbyterian thing, and then you move beyond your youth. Although you're still very young, well, we're all very young in our way. And I guess the question that I'd ask is, you know, as your own individual faith matures, what are some of the kind of critical points in reflection that help that maturation, where you go from the faith of a child or an adolescent and into a more adult and nuanced faith? And I'm not going to call on you individually. We'll just do this very conversational.
I'll jump in. I went from a Methodist environment to a Lutheran college. And again, being a musician, all of my musical time was really, I realized when you caused me to reflect on all of this, a lot of my musical life was spent in sacred spaces. And I loved my journey there, and I had wonderful teachers, but sadly I lost my mom my senior year of college in November. So that was really, really a painful time. And I think that's when I really tried to find something to hang on to. You know, you grow up overnight when that happens. And so I came home to finish my student teaching. The college was great about that, and to help my dad and my brother. And then after I graduated that year, my first church job, you know, I was teaching, but I also had a church job. I was the organist, the choir director at the Presbyterian Church in Chester. And I was there for a long time, and I'll never forget that first Christmas after my mom passed, playing a Christmas Eve service and just sobbing because and it was just an awful time. But that sacred space, that experience, filled some of that emptiness. And I realized at that point that I needed something to hang on to. And then I also had a very close friend of my mother's who was very faith-filled, who kind of stepped in as a surrogate mom, and that was really helpful.
Was she a person of faith herself?
Yes, she was a very devout Catholic, but my mom's best friend from childhood, so that was really helpful. And I had a lot of wonderful people around me to support me, but that was a real turning point for me. I was 21. You know, you're not a grown-up yet, but I became a grown-up overnight.
So the combination of this traumatic experience, you know, both of you lost mothers at young ages. The traumatic experience of the loss of your mom at the transition point in your life. You're senior year in high school, in college, and you're trying to figure out, you know, what comes next. I imagine you were thinking of a teaching career.
Well, I was thinking about going to grad school. I'd been accepted at Bloomington in Indiana as a
legendary music program.
piano performance major, and my piano teacher, who I still am in touch with, God bless him, he said, Michele, you're not going to want to do that. He said, that's not what you wanna do. And then the way the timing worked out, I said, I'll put it on hold, and I came home and taught, and that was it.
And it sounds as though your musical orientation, your talents, and your commitment to that meet up with churches. And that this has something to do with probably the maturation of your faith.
Yeah.
I mean, how's that faith maturing as, you know, you're getting ever more into a life as a church musician, as a church singer?
Well, that was kind of like a part-time thing when I was
Sure.
teaching, and through my whole journey, you know, working, I love making music, but you couldn't quite, in a public school experience, bring that piece in. So that the next turning point for me was when I was eligible for retirement. I'm jumping ahead, is that okay?
Sure.
I had gone through 9 superintendents trying to teach, you know, to convince them that educating the whole child was really important. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was a toxic work environment.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Tom Sheffield. I said, you know, my professional and personal and spiritual life are having a head on here. And so when I was eligible for retirement and they said, you're working for $100 a month, I said, okay, I'm out of here. But I knew I wanted to still work. And then I got a call from Sister Pat. She said, oh, I need a music teacher. Do you know anybody? I said, would you take me? And so my next 17 years with the sisters was a real turning point in being in that environment.
Yet obviously some piece of that musical piece connected to your understanding of faith, because here you are, Stephen minister, been a deacon, you know, and that has to come from some place of more than just being moved by music, right?
Well, you know, my piano teacher had this wonderful quote on his piano. It was a cellist, Marty Piatigorsky, and it talks about, you know, music chooses you. It's not like I'm going to be a dentist. I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. And thank God my parents were incredibly supportive. My father said, okay, just make sure you can do something with it. And of course, back then, when I went to school, you either a teacher or a nurse or you got married. That was it. So I've really been blessed to have all these, as Linda Gaden would call them, God winks, and people in my life that have just, as I reflect back, I don't think they're coincidences. I really don't. So.
Rachel, Paul?
Yeah, I want to backpedal a little bit, because I think an important part was, why did we bring the children at Presbyterian? I guess it's a question a lot of people ask. We made that decision before we didn't wait to have children.
No, we made it before I got married.
Yeah, even before we got married, we had figured out what we were going to do religiously. And my feeling was, she's probably going to live longer than I'm going to live. I'm 6 years older than Michele, and with my family background, people dropping dead. Like my brother died at a blackjack table when he was 49
God bless
years
him.
old. And so, you know, with that history, and my other brother had quadruple bypass. So I really had a feeling that I probably would not, the other way is Michele would be the survivor.
Isn't the word that they use post-deceased or pre-deceased? Don't you love that term?
Somewhat.
You know, that, like insurance people talk. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, teacher.
Sorry. I didn't interrupt you.
But I think a lot of people ask, people in the church have asked us, how do you reconcile that? How do you make the decision of what you're going to bring your child? And for us, it was very easy. Of course, we were a little bit older. Our parents were deceased, except for Michele's dad. And we didn't have that family pressure, so it was easy. And I don't know, I think I just felt it was the right thing to do. And Michele was probably more heavily invested in her religion than I was. And so that's how we made that decision. Yeah, it was not hard for us. It gets hard when the parents get involved.
I was like, wait, interesting. No, I'm just kidding. Like, I didn't have the pressures, but we did. No, I think it goes back to my comment about it almost being easier that your religions were so different than I think Catholicism versus being Presbyterian. Because they're so close, but yet so different. And so how do you know, for me, I didn't plan and still don't plan to convert to Catholicism, but I always said, you know, I'm happy to go to a space that feels faith-filled, where I can still pray and lean on a God, as long as our children have that space too. And I think for us, especially, I feel like my generation, I don't have a lot of friends that have their children in the church, quite honestly. It's almost like an anomaly now, which I struggle with, because I can't imagine not having just that, I would call it a foundation, right? When things start to crack, like, what do you turn to? Like, how do you, you know, in this world that we're living in now, how do you not say, like, that there's a higher power that will guide us through whatever the challenges are? So for me, it was less about it, Judaism, Catholicism, it was just more about a foundation of spirituality and faith. And you know, my husband, you know, like I said, grew up Roman Catholic, went to church every Sunday. I mean, when we started dating, I went to church with him, and you know, that was fine with me. I just didn't go up and take the Eucharist, and you know, now you can go up and cross your arms and they'll bless you, and you know, but we always aligned that we had similar faiths, and are okay with it also being different understandings of what the symbols are and all that. So I think for me, it's just unique in that I'm growing up in an era where less and less people are committing to a religion for whatever reason. And I always have tons of friends, you know, like, oh, I'm going to Sunday school on Sunday. Like, God, I gotta get my kid to go. I gotta sign them up. I'm like, just do it, you know, like, just do it. And I think there's, you know, it's hard to sit through church with two little ones. And, you know, it's not easy, but, and I may not be getting everything out of that service, but they know it's a sacred space, and it's family time. And that's how I grew up, so.
Yeah, we always told our kids that going to church is what our family does. And, you know, it was easy for us. Rachel and David were very compliant.
They were like,
Where
we're
did they
scared
get
of you.
that
Yeah, we
from?
have a choice.
As a
They didn't get
fun-
that from you, did they?
Well, we were known as, I was Adolf Hitler, and she was Eva Braun.
We really feel that way.
No, I like that.
Oh, dear.
But I see it now, even in my own children. Like, you know, my oldest is 10, and even if, like, it'll come out in little things she says. Like, you know, there'll be a kid who's sick in her class, or she has a very good friend whose mother has breast cancer, and you know, she'll always say, you know, I want to pray for them, Mommy. Let's say a prayer for them. It's like, it's almost like instinctual now in them, and that makes me feel good knowing that. I never want to force something. I definitely don't feel like I want to take the route of, this is what we have to do and you have to do it. Like, I know you kind of said that, like, this is what we do, but I'd rather it be something that they somewhat enjoy partaking in, because that's how they're gonna stick with it, right?
Could I just ask you if any of you felt like your faith impacted your work? You're still working, Rachel. Or that your work impacted your faith?
Well, I spent 17 years amidst the nuns. And Sister Patricia, who's now the provincial, I met her in 1976. She was a choral director when I was at Randolph, and we became very good friends. But, and Rachel went to school there, so she can vouch for this, but we had to pray before each class with our kids. And one of the things I noticed was that many of them kind of went on automatic pilot. You know, they would say part of the rosary or whatever. And I say, you know, and we had the freedom, we just had to pray, or we could do a reading, and I would have the kids write their prayers, and it was amazing. We made a booklet of things that they could say. But the sisters really called each of us to be the best version of ourselves. Not that that was an edict, it was just the environment you were in. And I do remember when the first or second year I was there, we had a concert, and I said to the girls, gosh, you know, that really went well. What happened? And this little cherub said to me, well, you know, Dr. Y, we trusted you, you trusted us, and together we trusted God.
Oh, wow.
That kid get an
Hey, they all did.
Michelle was a tough grader.
You know, and I just thought, whoa. And even though I prepared all the liturgies with the theology teachers, I think that's when it really turned on for me, because I was in that environment and I was able to connect how I was feeling with my work and making it really special. So those 17 years, and even now when I go to play Mass for the sisters, it's just an incredible thing. And it's funny, if I don't show up with this guy, I go, where's Paul? So they now have the nuns trained. When he gets a blessing, one of the sisters does the Star of David on his forehead. It's like, hello. So, you know, the Filipinis are a wonderful order. Their mission is to teach young women and children, and they're just extraordinary women. And I recognize the selflessness of that and how they live their faith in ways seen and unseen. And it just, even my colleagues, all of them would tell you that it's just a very special place to work and to be in. So I think that was kind of sealed the deal for me those last 17 years. Yeah, so.
In recent years, there's been a lot of research on spirituality and not only mental health, but physical health. That there is a correlation. Those people who are spiritual tend to do better with the medical part of their lives than the spiritual part. And so there are a lot of times in my practice when I always obviously did an intake interview, and I'd always find out something about their spirituality, the client's spirituality, and there are times when I would make a recommendation like, you may want to go back to your church, someone that hasn't been there for years, encouraging them to get back into that arena, because prayer can be very healing. So in my work, you know, I tried not to be too demanding about going to church or synagogue, that people would go back and they would say, you know, that was really helpful to me. And I found it helpful here. It was my 1 hour of peace service here. I felt it was very peaceful. I also found that this was a church that was really caring. And in 1986, I had quadruple bypass, and I was a young lad at that time. I won't tell you how old it was, because then you'll know how old I am now. I don't care. But I was in recovery, still with all the tubes coming out. I looked like I was on death's bed or door. And I'm laying there, I open my eyes, and I see a collar of a minister. My first thought was that I died. This was my funeral. Definitely so. I mean, Tom Sheffield came to Newark, or went to Newark, to see me. And he was the first person. And that was very caring of him. Didn't expect it. And then Michele came in next. You said to Tom, "What are you doing here?" And I think he said something like, "You all need me?" Something like that. So that was the first time that the minister showed concern. And that continued. Even one of the interims, Coleman, if you remember him? Oh, you weren't here. I was shocked when he said to me at the end of the service, I was coming out the back side door here. He looked at me and said, "Paul, have a happy Passover." I thought, how the hell did he know I was Jewish? That was number one.
Right.
I think that John Eyre had something to do with that, right, John? You're shaking your head, right? I figured it out, John.
He's in the link.
John, whenever we had a minister come in, I think John, for some reason, said, "We got a Jew in the pew."
Were those your actual words, John? Or did you phrase it any more delicate?
We try to say it like it is. I'm from Newark.
I knew that was coming.
St. Michael's boys, yeah.
They must have implanted something in us. And the congregation was very welcoming here. And I started to feel early on that this was a place that I wanted to be. So, as I said before, I've been coming 40 years and have loved every minute of it.
And you're not a Presbyterian in the official sense, correct?
They won't let me.
Well,
I tried.
yeah, ask Audrey for dispensation.
Somebody tried.
Audrey, can you wave a minute tonight?
Oh, totally.
Well, I had asked about being a Stephen minister, and
Yeah, we got into bat a few times on that one.
people went to bat and tried to convince
St. Louis.
St. Louis, was,
Wow,
yeah,
I
that
hadn't been aware of that. Well,
they
okay,
wouldn't allow it.
so we're talking about faith journeys, and all journeys have beginnings, and then they have phases that unfold and unfold and unfold, and you're in this phase now that we would call the here and now. So in terms of your faith journey, in terms of how you understand God, and all related questions, where are you? Right now, as we're sitting here on this chilly February morning in 2025.
No, I was just thinking of, you were asking the question before about work,
Mhm.
and I was just thinking, I mean, I work in the business world, so there's
Yeah.
little room for
Right.
religion, but you'll find if you're open about things, you have conversations with colleagues, and I manage a team of 10 associates, and we talk about all sorts of things, and they know I celebrate all the things, and it's a very open culture. But at Mars too, like I have participate in this, we have lots of like mutual interest groups, they call it, and we have a group that formed called Shalom Mars, which sounds funny, but 2 Jewish gals at Mars started a group. All are welcome to join, and they'll have video calls where like they'll have someone come in and show you how to make challah, and you can they're trying to teach people about the faith, and it's been really cool to see people who join those calls who aren't Jewish, who just have an interest in supporting the community, and so that's been kind of cool to get involved in the workplace, which is really interesting. They actually had a Holocaust survivor come, and I regret listening to it at work because I was in a conference room sobbing, but she came in and told her story of the Holocaust, and I had 200 plus people from work on this call, and we're all pinging each other at work like, oh my gosh, you hear, like, we're getting chills, like, and that's bringing that into the workplace in a way, right? And it's opening people up to being comfortable to having those discussions, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever it is you are. And so I think Mars particularly, I'm thankful that from a cultural value standpoint, I mean, there's groups for all of that. Like, we have people who come in and can talk about anything and feel comfortable. And I think, especially, not to get political, but given the state of the world now, I think it's important more than ever for those of us who do have faith and welcome people of any religion to be open about that and to feel like you can speak out and be supportive. So for me, it's more of like a social, economical state right now. I proudly stand up and say, part of my heritage is Jewish and part of it is not. And, how do we kind of bring those things together? So, yeah.
I like the idea of the cooking and challah.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah, you
have
could
a
do it.
class.
Well, she
not
could
for the
teach it.
challah,
She does it.
For your matzo ball soup.
Oh, the soup.
It's
Yeah.
matzo ball soup ministry.
Yeah.
My soup has become legendary.
You should have a little class because they have things.
Yeah, we can do that.
Baking cookies. I've done stuff with the preschool. You could do that and teach everybody how to make Your
Matzo balls,
It's
and
all-
soup.
And the soup, it's not all created equal, you know, so.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure people have at least a few minutes to engage with our panel, but just before we do.
Oh, where we are?
Sort of where are you now in the faith sense, each of you?
Well, you really forced me to go back in the archives, but, and reflecting on all this, I really believe in it, that God puts us where we need to be. And things are not coincidences. I think there's a plan. And I think back on all the things that have been instrumental in different people in my life and the decisions I've made. When I look back on it, I go, oh, I don't really think that was a coincidence. So I feel really strongly about that. And then I think we have to get involved in our faith community. I think a lot of what I've experienced is through being a deacon, being in the choir, serving in different committees. David was a ringer on the green. We spent a lot of time with that. And I think Stephen Ministry, well, I was a deacon, and that really called me to Stephen Ministry. And there's some of my classmates here. We did a lot of soul searching, and I think you'll remember, I said to you, I don't think I can do this. We got halfway through, right, Linda? We had a lot of crying together, but I said, I don't think I'm cut out for this. I mean, that was gut-wrenching. We were all very vulnerable. But being on the other side of it, it's really been, I have gotten so much more from being with my care receiver and this journey than I ever thought that. And I just brought closure with my care receiver, and it was the sweetest thing. I said to her, I said, well, you know, you were my first. Was there anything that I could have done for you that you needed that I didn't do? And she grabbed my hand and she said, you gave me your time and you gave me your presence. We just have to be there for each other. And going back to the musical connection, I had the privilege of working with Robert Shaw for many years in a Carnegie Hall professional training workshop. And I'll never forget these words. He said, as soon as we find each other, the miracle begins. So that's where I am.
So it sounds as though your understanding of God is of a God that intimately knows you and has some sort of plan for you. That's what I thought I heard. Paul or Rachel?
Okay, where am I now? Well, I've grown very comfortable being here, which is due to a lot of reasons. The members of the church have always been very engaging with me. Been involved in a lot of activities. Even though I'm not a member, I still can do things. I don't have to necessarily, well, you don't pay dues here like in the synagogue. You have no dues. I'm comfortable. And go back to Tom Sheffield, but I guess she was a business person. Asked me if I would like be an usher for Christmas Eve service, which involved the usual usher. In those days, we didn't have flashlights, but we would walk you to your seat, like a real usher. They don't do that.
The movie usher.
Right. And I said, well, let me find out from Tom Sheffield if I can do that. It might be sacrilegious. So Tom said, sure, you could do that.
The ceiling didn't fall down.
Yeah, no, some of the tiles have fallen.
Well, they have, but it wasn't because of you.
I wasn't, it was because of my presence.
No.
And that has continued over the years where I've been asked to usher. Now they call it the welcome team. I was asked today, for today, but I couldn't do it because of you.
So your Russian emigre grandparents, who were quite Orthodox
Yes.
Jews, have a grandson who finds in a Presbyterian church community, support, peace.
Nice way of reframing things.
I think if I read it correctly, that's about what you said. Great.
No, I mean, I think I already kind of said where I am. I mean, I've got 2 little ones, so starting out, you know, exposing them to the church and all of that, which they've both been baptized, so they've kind of been living through that. And I think for me, it's just faith continues to be something to lean on during hard times. And again, no matter the religion, I think it's just important to have that guiding.
Because the hard times come.
Yes.
They do.
I think you're gonna get the last word here, Paul, and I'd love to allow for questions, but we're gonna get thrown out of here in about 2 minutes because the fire is coming. So if you have questions, you know where to find all of these folks. And a quick word just before we go to Paul. Next week, there is no Donuts in Theology. Janet Foster is doing what we think will be a great presentation after church over at the Methodist Church on the Green Book, the guide for Black Americans looking for lodging as they travel around the country, and that happens after church. Paul, you get the last word?
It was approximately 15 years ago, we had interims here. Susan Reisinger was the interim pastor. And I was sitting in the pew and I said to myself, why am I here? Why do I attend church? It was so different attending church than going to synagogue. And her sermon struck me. She talked about God, the presence of God. And her sermon answered that question for me. Why do I come here? Because of the finding the presence of God around me. It was the first time that ever happened. In all the years I was involved in churches, synagogues, it just was enlightening. And I wrote her a letter that she has kept since somewhere in a drawer. And I called her and I wanted to bring that letter, and she couldn't find it either. And if I ever find it, I'll share it with you, Rich.
You shared it with us, in effect, here today. And I think I was going to ask Audrey for a closing prayer, but that you might have a hard time improving on.
I think so.
I want to thank you, Paul, and Michele, and Rachel.
I'll be happy to say a prayer.
No, don't do that one.
No.
No. That's only at dinner.
No. You're good. Stop there. Stop there.
I was just going to say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei bari hagafen, amen. That's a blessing over the wine. Let's get some wine.
That's, maybe we should get away from donuts.
Yeah. There we go.
I really want to thank all 3 of you, and I want to thank everybody for being here today, and everybody that will watch this on YouTube later on in the week. And really, thank you so much. You enhanced our learning so much, and we're just delighted that you had a chance to share
Thanks
your
for
faith
asking.
journey with
Thank you for
us.
asking
Thank
us,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. Paul? Do that.
Whenever you